To tell us more, we have with us three speakers. Now, our first one is Nick Herbert, who I should introduce perhaps with the proper title, which is Right Honourable the Lord Herbert of South Downs CBE. And Nick was appointed Chair of the College of Policing on the 1st of January this year. Now, he's also Chair of the Countryside Alliance, the Project for Modern Democracy, the Global TB Caucus and the Global Equality Caucus. Now, most recently, Nick was appointed as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy on LGBT rights. He was awarded a CBE in 2016 and became a life peer in 2020. In his spare time, he enjoys racing and country sports, watching cricket and rugby, and going to the theatre, cinema, opera and ballet, all things that we can once again enjoy. Now, our second speaker is Chief Constable Andy Marsh, QPM, who has been appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of the College of Policing and will begin his new role this month. Now, Andy was a Chief Officer for 15 years, has worked across 3 police forces, including as Chief Constable in Hampshire Constabulary and Avon and Somerset Constabulary since 2016. He's recently retired from this role. He was awarded the Queen's Police Medal, in 2018. And we are delighted that Nick and Andy are with us today. But we also have with us Bernie O'Reilly, who is the interim CEO of the College of Policing. And you're going to hear more about him shortly. You can see they are keen. So let's give them a round of applause, please.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the kind introduction. Thank you so much for having me here. It's slightly unexpected for me to be back at the Superintendent's Conference. I certainly wasn't expecting it. I think the last time I was with you at a conference was about a decade ago, when I was Policing Minister, and I think we had a violent discussion for 3/4 of an hour about whether the mission of the police was to cut crime or not, and ended up, I think, agreeing with each other. I always found these sessions incredibly valuable, and I'm sure I will again today. I thought I'd just start off by explaining why I've come back into the world of policing, and then talk a little bit about the fundamental review which I've instituted at the College of Policing, before handing over to Andy, who I know wants to say a few words, and then Andy, Bernie, and I will be able to answer your questions. So, as I said, this wasn't expected. I wasn't expecting to come back to policing, but I was approached about the role of chairing the college. And it immediately interested me because I had, in fact, been responsible for setting up the college when I was policing minister. It wasn't a manifesto commitment then, but with the various other reforms that were going through, I became persuaded, and a number of people had done work on this, including Peter Nehru, that there was a need to set up a professional body of policing. The challenges spoke for themselves, but I felt that focusing on the professional development and leadership of police officers at all ranks was important. And the way we set up the college was that it would be run on a day-to-day basis by a CEO who would be a senior police officer, but that the chair of the college, I think by law, has to be a civilian. So I've been brought in as the civilian chair of the board. I don't run the college in that sense. The job of the board and the chair, of course, is to hold the executive team to account and to set the strategic direction for the college. What I did was to talk to people about what they felt about where the college had got to. I then brought to those who were seeking the new chair my own views, and there was actually a matching of views between my own and those that I heard from key people about the college, which was a very strong view that the college was a good thing and a good idea and an important body, but that it hadn't quite fulfilled the potential and promise that we had set for it a decade ago, that there was frankly more to do. And what I said was that if I was to take this job, that I would not want simply to be fulfilling the effectively traditional role of a chair in exercising governance, ensuring that things were run properly. Of course, that is absolutely crucial. But that I felt that a fundamental review of the college would be necessary, leading to a reset for the age which is ahead of us. And I don't think any of us are in any doubt about the scale of the challenges facing the service. So immediately on taking office on the 1st of January, I instituted that review, and that's what I briefly want to talk about today. We have yet to discuss the emerging findings of the review at the board. That will happen next week. So I'm not going to be revealing to you in detail the things that we are going to say, because the board hasn't discussed them yet. But what I can give you an indication of is the direction of travel, and I've no doubt that Andy will want to fill out with his own views. I mentioned, of course, that it is the CEO who runs the college, and I'm absolutely delighted that we have succeeded in recruiting a first-class police officer to be the next substantive CEO of the college in Andy Marsh, and I very much look forward to working with him. And I'm very grateful for Andy for agreeing to be here today ahead of his formal start. And I'm also very grateful indeed to Bernie O'Reilly, not just for being here with us today, but for so ably running the college as interim CEO over quite an extended period of 9 months. And I feel greatly strengthened by the fact that I have this great body of experience in our executive team that is here with me today and will be guiding the college going forward. If you look at the 3 key things that the college was set up to do and should do, it is to hold the evidence base for policing about what works. It's to set standards as the legal standard-setting body for policing in England and Wales. And it's to lead on the learning and development that is so important in our service. And essentially, what the fundamental review will be saying is that we need to continue doing all of those 3 things, but we need to do them better. And I think if you look at I'd like to look at this through the prism of what I think are 2 major challenges that face policing that we simply have to deal with and equip ourselves to tackle over the years ahead. The first was effectively alluded to by Tom Windsor this morning, which is the fact, and it is the fact, of the disaggregated policing model and the 43 individual forces. I don't sense that there's any political appetite in any part of our system to build bigger forces. And so the 43 model is here to stay. And we all know that it has strengths, but also brings with it challenges. And I think one of the obvious challenges relates to the first key function of the college in respect of the evidence base. How good are we as a service in picking up what works, in picking up where there is really good, innovative practice and sharing it rapidly across the service? I think the college has a very important role to play in that respect, but it's one where I think we need to be doing a great deal better. So I think, first of all, accelerating, turbocharging the What Works Centre in the college and ensuring that we can disseminate good practice and hold an evidence base that is of practical use to the service, no more so than in respect of you, the superintendents, who will be in charge of so much of this and will be driving so much of this innovation. I think that we need to find a way to overcome the 43 force diversity and accelerate the sharing of best practice using technology. Similarly, the 43 force model is an impediment in respect of reaching common standards. And the feedback that we were receiving in the fundamental review, which, by the way, has been conducted by an intensive process of interviews, has been critical in this respect. The message that's come back to us is that standards should be common and enforced. And of course, that is easier to say than it is to deliver. where you have forces that wish to do things in their own way. So a more resolute focus on common standards, I think, will be one of the other key emerging findings. And thirdly, and this is the area I just want to focus on, and which I think is perhaps the biggest challenge for the service, relates to a different issue, because it's not just the fact that the service is disaggregated that I think is the hurdle. I think it is a bigger question than that in respect of the third key area that the college is responsible for, which is professional development, learning, and development. And that is the extent to which the service as a whole, if we just take a step back and think of the service rather than the different components of the service, the extent to which the service as a whole really takes seriously in the sense that it invests time and resource in learning and development on a continuing basis. That, I think, is the big challenge for policing. How much does Policing Inc. in England and Wales really value that learning and professional development? And the interaction between the college and the service is, if you like, spasmodic in this respect. It happens at the point of entry, of course, critical. It happens at the point of the acquisition of specialist skills. It happens at the point of promotion. What we don't have in policing is CPD or any kind of culture of CPD. And of course, in that respect, it's very different from the military. Now, the military have the advantage that they're deployed part-time and then have time resting and devote an enormous amount, therefore, to training, professional development, and that feeds through to all sorts of different ways in which they create a kind of strategic hub and think through the future challenges for the military, effectively a staffing college, and all of the things that we don't have. The police service is incredibly busy, 24/7. Operationally, too busy. All of you will feel yourselves to be too busy. Every police officer and member of staff feels himself to be busy. And we see that it is a challenge to ask the service and to ask individuals to carve out time for professional development. And of course, it has resource implications as well. But I think if we are to rise to the challenges of the future, which you all know about, which include this extraordinary digital revolution, the rise of demand, and the challenges that I have spoken of, investing in the development of our people from the point of joining the service to the point at which they leave on a continuing basis is the big and next challenge for the service. And it's one that I think the college has to be absolutely at the centre of. And we are going to have to think of new and better ways to do this. And I think it's going to require, if you like, a kind of resettlement within policing, because this isn't just a matter of the college declaring this. It has to be agreed effectively with the service. We have this whole new cohort of entrants now coming in through the Uplift programme. And these new points of entry, which we're certainly not going to go back on. And there will be a great expectation from this cohort about the training, professional development, learning that they're going to receive, not just as they enter as new recruits, but on a continuing basis. And their peers will be receiving it in the different walks of life that they are in on a continuing basis. How serious are we as a service about delivering it ourselves? And once we've answered that question and say it is important, then how are we going to ensure that time and resource is given to it and that it is not just regarded as a nuisance, an adjunct, getting in the way of busy day-to-day responsibilities? That, I think, is the big challenge for policing going forward. I'm going to hand over to Andy now to talk a little bit more, but I'd just like to say one further thing in conclusion. The board of the College of Policing is immensely strengthened by the policing representation that's on it, not just because we have a senior officer as our CEO and indeed a senior officer as our deputy COO, and we have many secondments in the College of Police officers, superintendents, and actually that's something we're going to want to extend considerably and will be part of the review that we will be announcing. But it's also strengthened by the fact that we have formal representation of the policing organisations on our board, whether it's a representative from the Police Federation, whether it's a representative of the chief officers, and Neil Basu is now taking up that position and will be joining his first board next week, or whether, crucially, it is the representative of the Police Superintendents Association. And I would like to pay tribute to your president, Paul Griffith, who plays a very important role on our board and is a strong, committed and valued member of the board of the College of Policing, adds immeasurably, actually, to our deliberations, works very hard at it, contributes very strongly to our work, not just on the board, but on crucial committees as well, and is a strong voice for you, the Superintendents Association, on our board. And I'm very grateful to Paul for his support. And I think the design whereby we can ensure that we are plugged in to policing is very important. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to set out the general direction of travel for the Fundamental Review. I look forward to answering questions from you, and now I'm going to hand over to Andy.
Thank you, Nick, and for your kind words in respect of my appointment. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to put my glasses on. Okay. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. It's a great honour. I'll try without them, actually, to make me look serious. A few speakers that I've heard have referenced how many times they've spoken at this conference. This is my first. It's my first time in 34 years of policing, either as a participant or a speaker, so forgive me for being a little bit nervous. I'm also between jobs, technically, I guess, unemployed. So I feel very much like a new boy or girl at school today, which gives me an interesting perspective before I take up my role as chief executive this coming Monday. I'm technically between my jobs. My daughters tried to persuade me to do something useful, and they wanted me to do Deliveroo, but fortunately I've got this fantastic job. Now, I've had a little bit of time since I left Avon to Somerset, and a bit of time when I've known I was coming here to speak to you. So in thinking about what I wanted to say to you about, as the new boy, so to speak, I thought about it this weekend when I was dropping my younger daughter at university. I don't know who was more emotional, actually, me, her, or my wife, but it feels as though it's an end of an era because it's my second and last child to leave home. But I gave her lots of advice, as you can well imagine. But I think that things come in threes. So I thought I'd give you three things I told my daughter that perhaps I should accept myself some of the advice. Make lots of friends, brackets, the right ones. She's quite shy, so don't hide in your room. And be careful with social media was the third point. Now, in respect of that advice to me, I'm here today to make friends. If I'm to deliver the ambition that the Fundamental Review will set out, I'm going to need lots of friends and support. The second thing is I want to be seen. I want to connect. I want to feel the pulse of policing at every level. I'm not going to hide in my room. I'd welcome invitations to come and see you and the colleagues across the policing family that you work with. So please help me do that. And the third thing is I will have a social media presence. I did in Hampshire. I didn't in Avon and Somerset. I will be careful, obviously. I won't take criticism too seriously, which I think we can all feel that a little bit. But actually, there's a serious point there in terms of the criticism. I'm going to say something about the context that we operate in a moment. It's difficult out there. It really is difficult. I will be making a call for unity in the way that we go about our business later in this speech. So seriously, what a fantastic honour it is to be coming in to take up a position of chief exec of your College of Policing. And I'm going to use that word on quite a few occasions because I think it's important, your College of Policing. Now, congratulations to Paul and the team on arranging such a fantastic conference. It's my first in-person conference since the start of COVID. And I think that whilst there are many benefits to distance learning, and Tom Windsor spoke about some of the issues we've faced in COVID, actually meeting face-to-face is really important in terms of cementing relationships. That's why I don't want to hide in my room. So congratulations on doing that. I personally have gone up the collar size through COVID, so perhaps it will do me some good getting out as well. Okay, what do I want to talk about seriously? I want to talk about the future of the College of Policing, obviously. But I can't do that without saying something about the context that we operate in. I've said it was difficult. So I will address what we're here to add value to. What is the purpose of the college? And to be effective, the College of Policing needs to understand that operating environment and those long-term trends. So where do we go to find out about that operating environment? Now, here's the thing. The college wrote and published an excellent document in 2020. It was called Taking the Long View to 2040, the Future Operating Environment. It was done by the What Works team, and it set out a number of scenarios and megatrends. I would commend that document to all of you to read it. But actually, these few that I'm going to talk about have a relevance, because I'm going to talk about an idea which is the obstacle is the way. So one of the megatrends we see is inequality. Through COVID, we've seen a backlash of inequality in respect of race, George Floyd, in respect of gender, Sarah Everard, in respect of health, COVID. Society will not tolerate inequality. It won't. We'll tolerate lots of things, but it won't tolerate that, and neither will we. So actually the answer is we need a college that helps promote equality and fairness. We've seen a declining trust in institutions, which is an interesting phenomenon that the police are not exempt from. So what does the college do? It needs to build trust in institutions. Now, how does it do that? I'm going to talk about how we will do that. We've seen a digital and data revolution. So the college needs to help build a workforce that is digital and data savvy and data literate. We've seen changing public and employee expectations. The college has a role in supporting the development of our workforce. We've seen a trend of globalization for many years, decades in fact, someone would say centuries. We are a globalized society in terms of people, trade, and of course criminality. So we need a College of Policing that is interconnected to the global system of policing law enforcement, both in terms of what works and interoperability. And finally, Sir Tom spoke about the much welcome uplift of 20,000 officers and the challenge. It is much welcome, but with it go expectations to cut crime and keep people safe, not unreasonably. So we can succeed in tackling these obstacles, and I've already said that the obstacle is the way. It's my privilege to be able to open the Strategic Command course next week. There are 3 themes on that course. They are in brief: inclusion, politics, and legitimacy. The obstacle is the way. Now, let me give you a couple of little examples about that have made an impact on me, and these are not my ideas, they're ideas that came forward from the people I was privileged to work with. Why did we personally issue body-worn video in Hampshire? We did it significantly because of citizen journalism, and I felt that we could do that better in terms of recording professionally what happened. So we saw the whole story. It's now part of what we do in policing. In terms of my experience in Avon and Somerset, people got murdered because we were missing the detail. We weren't joining the dots up. So we set an ambition to become the most digitally data-driven police force in England and Wales. So we can actually find solutions in these obstacles. We can use data to turn it from a blizzard of risk, an overwhelming feeling of demand, into smart information for smart officers and staff about what we do, what we don't do, and what we do differently. So the obstacle is the way. Now, in terms of the context, I also want to talk about the policing system. So Tom alluded to this, as did Nick just now. I'm going to talk about the policing system and the people in it. I do believe that the college has got a role in both to play. The system we operate in is not without its tensions. We know that. The benefits of local governance can sometimes collide with the tensions and benefits of central coordination. So any system, we're talking about policing or anything, I think you've had a session on environmental sustainability, any system needs to be balanced. Now let's call the balance that the college brings to this the glue that helps join it together. Without that balance, the system will be unsustainable, suboptimal, and eventually there will be some form of significant change or rebooting. What will happen during that period, if it is unsustainable and those tensions are not addressed, is that we will consume some of our brilliant ability to lead our people doing remarkable things by arguing with each other. We need unity. We need to make this system work, and the college has a role to play as the glue. Now, the Police Superintendents Association is part of that glue. that joins the component forces together. Witness the leadership of the people in this room today, and it's great to see so many old friends that I've worked with throughout my career. So the Superintendents Association are part of that glue. But let me take a moment talking about the role of superintendents. Now, I thought, well, what do I want to say about superintendents? Well, I could say that I understand the role of superintendent because I used to be one, but I thought that was almost as trivial as saying, well, I understand children because I used to be one as well. Shall I signal my jokes more clearly? Actually, I will be the first to recognise that since I was a police superintendent, over 15 years ago, I think, the world has changed massively. You bear a massive burden of privilege of leadership. So I need to recognise that. What I do know is in both forces I've led, superintendents and police staff equivalents play a vital role in delivering change, performance, policing operations, and people-focused leadership. Now, you'll note I said and police staff equivalent. We need to recognise that if we're to be at our best, we need to be inclusive, a theme that I will come back to. We have a Police Superintendents Association representative on the college board, and indeed Dan took a role advising on the selection of my appointment. So let me say now that I think Dan's a very good judge of character. Okay, but superintendents more broadly, the people you represent, will play a huge role. You do play a huge role promoting leadership, inclusion, professionalism, and delivery. So returning to that policing system that needs to be balanced, it can balance, definitely. But if it is to balance, the College of Policing must establish itself as a key, influential, indeed powerful partner in the management of that system. We have a role in respect of the people and the system. As incoming Chief Executive, it's important for me to recognise the achievements of the story so far, the first decade of the College of Policing. Now, there's too many to list, but recent achievements, the role that we've played in recruiting and helping stay on target for that uplift of 20,000, the role we play on accreditation of some of the highest risk, most controversial parts of our service, undercover policing, public order, firearms, and much more. The role we play in leadership development. Obviously, the Blue Ribbon event, the Strategic Command course is due to start next week, but there are many more things we do about leadership, and I shall return to leadership. The role we've played delivering promotion exams through COVID, the role that's been played writing at great pace the COVID regulations guidance, the role that we've played developing digital data and cyber skills. So at this point, I do want to publicly thank Mike Cunningham. Because of COVID, there certainly wasn't a chance for me to do that with him personally before he retired, but also Bernie, who has continued and built upon this work for the last 9 months. But if there's one thing that I can be sure of, given the context that I've described, it's that the context is uncertainty. That's going to continue. So we operate in a fast-moving, dynamic sector. Our service, our stakeholders and our partners actually need a College of Policing which will build upon those achievements, match, indeed sustain that pace of change. So some of the skills that we brought to those COVID regs, we can certainly read them across into other areas of work the college will be doing. So to facilitate this ambition, the what and the why, the fundamental review will inform this. So the fundamental review was commissioned by Lord Herbert, as Nick has said, and it will help us understand what the service needs from us to help deliver the mission to the public, to tackle crime and keep people safe. So at this point, I would want to thank anyone that's been involved in the submissions to that fundamental review. And just some of the scores on the doors with that is 80 interviews, 90 formal submissions, many focus groups, many visits, and you'll hear much more about it once the board has had sight of it. So without spoiling the outcome of that review, I can be sure of a few things. I can be sure that the college is here to fight crime and keep people safe, to support you doing that. That's our purpose. We're here to promote excellence in policing by connecting everyone involved in policing. You'll note I use the word everyone. Who do I mean? I mean police officers, federated ranks, superintendents, chief officers, volunteers, specials, police and crime commissioners, and their OPCCs. We are at our best when we stand shoulder to shoulder. With such a difficult and challenging operating environment, imagine what a force we will be not would be, will be, if we were to pull in the same direction. And that is the art of the superintendent and the chief officer, to get a force to pull in the same direction. You'll all have had experiences of seeing where that hasn't happened. Well, we need to do it as a service nationally. So why is this particularly important? With so many external critics, and what do I mean by that? I mean, social media can be an echo chamber. Misinformation is being proliferated. Imagine how powerful we will be if we're inclusive and we pull in that same direction. It's vital to our success and our sustainability. So the Fundamental Review will report some interim findings to the board next week. But coming back to what I'm sure of, I'm sure the service needs a trusted, authoritative, and relevant evidence base about what works. I'm sure that a decentralised service needs standards to achieve consistency. I'm sure that those involved in policing need the best training and CPD. And remember what I said about the mega trends, about changing employee expectations. 21st century professionals not only need the best CPD, they demand it. If they don't get it, they'll walk. That's what the young people will do these days. So this is part of our retention strategy as well. We need, through that approach to learning and professional development, to turn a culture of blame, which the service can still suffer from, to a culture of learning. So finally, if I'm sure of one thing, there's a role for the college to help find, develop, and nurture leadership of everyone involved in policing who has a leadership role to play. And you'll have heard people say this before, everyone's a leader in policing, and it can be misunderstood. Who is the leader? The leader is the one that sets an example, the one who influences, the one who walks the talk. And here is perhaps one of the most difficult things, the one who does the right thing on a difficult day. Now, those people, the people who do that, don't have to have stuff on your shoulder. Everyone is a leader. I think in terms of making time for professional development, taking it seriously, the Superintendents Association has been a pivotal player. You are all role models for that. And certainly I've got 2 former staff officers from Hampshire here and my former leadership champion, Sarah. It's nice to see you. So I'm serious about this. I've set up leadership academies in both forces I've led. I think that after leading 2 police forces for almost 9 years, the single most critical success factor of outstanding policing is leadership at every level. And I'm not talking about chief constables, important though they are in all of this. Perhaps the most important leadership is that takes place at 2 a.m. in the morning when there's no one else to ask for advice. Some of our most junior, less trained people are making the most difficult decisions, and we need to give them the right leadership. So I've talked about the what, and I've talked about the why, but the how is yet to be defined. I'm sure that the Superintendents Association and the people you represent will have a big role to play in the how. I want to use 600 free brains that work in the College of Policing. I want to tap into 200,000 who are involved in policing beyond that. For me, the how is about listening to people who know best. This is not about Andy Marsh dispensing some wisdom. If we're to be dynamic, though, we do need a fresh approach to risk. What do I mean by this? I learned a bit about risk when I went on a motorbike safe course in Hampshire as a born-again biker, but I wasn't quite born again. I've had bikes all my life. But I understood for the first time as a police officer what the psychology was about why perhaps motorbikes hit, sometimes with tragic consequences, an isolated tree on a bend. It is actually because the rider is fixated by the risk, and the risk becomes a reality. We can do that in the service. We can do that. So where there are obstacles, we need to turn them into solutions, but we sometimes need to lift our heads to allow ourselves to be professionally developed and to see opportunities that might lie outside of our horizon. Now, if we're going to have this new approach to risk, I can also be sure that there'll be challenges and setbacks. I've dealt with a few in my time as chief. What I would say about those challenges and setbacks, they will not define us. What defines us is our response to them. And actually, there's some really important lessons here around race and inclusion that I think are relevant to that. So the obstacle certainly is the way, and we will have a new approach to risk. So if we're going to reach our potential, and obviously I want us to, the service, the college, will be passionate about leadership. We will be the best in the world at identifying what works in a pragmatic way, from 2 a.m. in the morning to actually a 5-year report by a university on what works. And our economic engine is driven by our relevance to the people involved in policing and our stakeholders. Those are important. So I've said that we've got a headcount of about 600 in the college, but in a context where 21st century world-class leadership is about influence and not control, our value will be the enabling glue that joins policing together, the system that helps develop our people in pursuit of their vocation to cut crime and keep communities safe. That is what we're going to do. So I'd like to conclude by describing what success looks like. I always like to start with the end in mind. And I always like to work in three. So I'm going to give you 3 words with 3 sub-bullets. Success looks like a service which is proud of its association with its College of Policing. Like the time for the College of Policing and them needs to end. Success looks like a service which is proud of the learning and continuous professional development, which is a hallmark, not a nuisance, a hallmark of its profession. Success looks like a service which is proud of realistic standards that we can deliver, despite all the pressures upon us. The second word, success looks like a service which is confident in what works. Now there's a thing. Confident in leadership at every level. There's another thing. Confident in its College of Policing as an independent and authoritative voice. I don't want to hog the stage today or any time, but I want you to hear from people in the College of Policing, an authoritative and independent voice. Finally, success looks like connection. Connection to the College of Policing. Connection between the service that helps give our communities consistency. Now, why is that important around standards? Just think about rape. Think about what we've heard about the criminal justice system. A college that helps connect to deliver consistency. And then finally, returning to my call for unity, the college looks like success if it connects the people in the system so that we all pull in the same direction and deliver our vocation, which is to fight crime and keep communities safe. None of this will be easy, but I don't need to tell a room full of police superintendents that policing is not easy. What in life that was ever worth doing was easy. I'm sure we've all had those conversations with our children as well. So the Police Superintendents Association have a key role in the future, not change for change's sake, but change for the better. You are catalysts. Make no mistake. You are as influential as you want to be, and I know you want to be influential. So I want to work with you to help build on the story so far, the brilliant work of the college, to make the college even more current, even more relevant, even more impactful. We know that nothing stands still, so our job is to move things on to make them better. I'm ambitious for the College of Policing. Make no mistake about that, but I'm ambitious for it because I'm ambitious for policing and the people in it and the often life-changing, life-saving services that are being delivered right now as I have the luxury of standing up here. So I believe that the college has got a vital role in supporting you to do that. I'm committed to listening to the voices, the views, the ideas of stakeholders and partners as I take on my new role as Chief Executive. I look forward to working with you, and thank you very much for your time.
Nick, Andy, thank you very much. And I know, Bernie, you're going to take part in the Q&A now that we've got. We've got lots of questions, so I'm going to go with the first one. And I know, Andy, you spoke about success being defined as connections and having that connection to the college. Well, the first question is, do you think that frontline officers know enough about the College of Policing? And if not, what's going to be done to improve knowledge and support and promote that in the future?
It might be that my colleagues have a view on it as well, but I would say that the answer is, of course, they don't know enough. We want them to know more. The survey work that was undertaken as part of the fundamental review gives us some hope that the penetration is out there to an extent and improving. But here's the thing, the enemy of the vocation of policing can be cynicism. I know we deal with a lot of difficult stuff, but we need to promote the college. We all need to promote our College of Policing. So that's going to be a big thing. If I said that our economic engine is driven by our relevance, we must make the college even more relevant to policing at 2 a.m. in the morning, on the street, and in the boardroom.
Okay. Bernie, do you want to come back on that question?
I think the short answer is no. I don't think we are seen as relevant to the front line as much as we could be and we should be. I think we are absolutely reliant on the critical mass of senior leaders in this room, superintendents, chief superintendents, big hitters in this room that have got influence back in policing, with the front line. We need that relationship with you. If we have that relationship, we can influence. But we absolutely need to connect better and to communicate better with policing than we have.
Okay, and Nick, do you want to add anything to that?
No, let's move.
Okay, all right, we'll go to the next question then, which is, do you feel there is sufficient diversity within the college senior leadership? I'm looking at you. I know the answer to that, but I want you to answer it.
Can I just say something about inclusion? Because actually, you know, what do you see up the front here? You see three men, three white men. But there's probably a lot more to those three white men that you don't know about. And actually, I recognise that policing needs to become more inclusive. One of the seminal defining moments of my whole time as a chief was the tasering of Judah Dunby. And I don't want to wake up to that stuff. I don't want police officers having to go through the pain of scrutiny. I don't want the damage to the community and individual pain. So it was at that moment that I said to my team, we need to do something different. And this has got to be really, this is not more fine words. We're going to become the most inclusive police force in England and Wales. How are we going to do that? Now, actually, one of the things, and I'm not saying we did, by the way, but you've got to be big and scary in your ambition sometimes. But one of the things that we did, because I think leadership starts with values, is we redefined values, one of which was inclusivity. And do you know what was like taking the lid off the bottle and letting the genie out? Our workforce want and need this. But do you know what one of the most impactful things we did to move inclusion forward? Because we know what people will say about it from a cynical point of view. And cynicism, the enemy of policing, tokenism, political correctness, that's not what we're talking about. So actually, people could say that you guys are not diverse enough. How inclusive are you? Now, actually, it's a fair criticism in terms of physical representation. But if we started asking questions, which I'm not going to because they're very personal, about how many siblings you had, what sort of household you grew up in, whether you had to have free school meals, whether you witnessed domestic violence, what your sexuality is, there is massive difference in every single one of us. And, you know, so one of the differences that I've always been happy to talk about, people should, I suffered with cancer when I was a young man. I did grow up in a one-parent family where I was embarrassed to claim school meals. My father was sectioned in front of me at school. We bring massive difference to the workforce, all of us. Now, actually, why is that important? If we're serious about inclusivity, like properly serious, then what we do is make it real for the whole workforce, not just the protected characteristic groups. Important, incredibly important, though that is. So I've got a challenge for you. You make inclusivity real for the people you work with. You try and identify white champions that will support black people within the community. That's a really important thing. We know that the LGBT community has embraced the concept of champions for a while. We all need to be champions for equality across everything, and you can make a massive difference. So I just think let's take a different slant on it. It isn't just about the headcount of the protected characteristic.
Okay, no, we take that. Nick, yeah.
Well, I just want to add that I'm doing my best to add diversity to this group by being a member of the House of Lords, a minority, an oppressed minority. In all seriousness, we're perhaps not representative of the senior leadership of the college here because 2 out of our 4 senior directors are women, and our board is diverse, and we take that very seriously and are now doing so in respect of the recruitment of 4 new non-executive directors. That process is underway. It is a very important challenge in policing, and we fully recognise that the college must embrace itself this agenda, given the responsibility that we have for people and professional development in policing. So it's a fair question, and it's one that we do need to take head on.
Okay, and I know you said you're not going to give us the findings of the review just yet. They're coming the next couple of days, or certainly next week. But will that be part of it? Or will there be something in there that will convince people that that really is something they can have faith in?
You can be certain that the fundamental review, and indeed everything that the college says, will place diversity at the centre. Andy did in his remarks, as you will have noted. I think the things that the college has been doing are evidence of that. And one of the big programs that we are committed to working alongside the NPCC is the new race and diversity program. And we know that the eyes of the outside world are on us in this respect, as they are on policing. We've made some progress in policing over the last few years, but I think we all understand not enough progress. And you have to lean in hard to this stuff.
Yeah.
And we as the college have to be part of that leaning in.
Okay, thank you. Will the fundamental review address what we can do quickly to increase competition for senior leadership positions? Quite often, too few people apply for the jobs.
Funnily enough, we've been talking about this this morning. And I think there are some... I'm not quite sure what the question would have meant in respect of senior leadership, whether you mean senior leadership within forces or whether you mean chief officer positions.
Do you mind if I ask the audience?
Because clarification.
Because I'm reading this as a question that's come in. Whoever asked that question, could they clarify? Or could someone give me a nod? Shall we take it as either of those then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I talked about the importance of leaning in relation to diversity in all respects. This, I think, does relate to one of the issues that Tom Windsor made in relation, points that he made in relation to HMIC and appointments of chief constables and the way in which HMIC was taken out of the process, which actually I did. I think there is an issue of a growing parochialism within forces in respect of appointments and less mobility in policing around the country than there used to be. And I think there are a lot of forces at work, but I think one of them is social change and people more inclined to stay local. And I think one of the challenges for us in respect of diversity is not just about the familiar ways of looking at diversity, but actually the sorts of things that Andy was alluding to ensure that we have a diversity not just of background and characteristic, but also of experience, and that we are correcting for what has been a growing tendency of parochialism right up to the appointment of chief officers within forces. And we have to find, it goes back to the point I was making about the sharing of experience, but also the gaining of experience in other forces. And I think that the college should have a role to play in that, and specifically in advice in the appointment of chief officers to address the point that Tom was making about HMIC's role. I think there are some social trends. Probably there are some financial issues to do with this as well as the views of PCCs themselves, but I think we do need to correct for. But true diversity in leadership teams at whatever level you're talking about is something that we should strive to achieve. I don't know whether Bernie's got...
I think both Bernie and...
Do you want to come in?
Andy want to say something?
I'm going to hand on to Bernie because I think Bernie knows some stuff I don't about this. But one of the things I've always felt was a critical success factor for the forces I've led was if I'm serious about what I say about leadership, I not only want to develop at every level, I want to churn out good people through PNAC and the command course. And so I think it's important that people are, chiefs have got a role to encourage and nurture that leadership talent. The college has got a role. I think more of that should happen. But one of my things that I've always done is a chief's roadshow. It's a presentation every year as chief. And in the last year, I took the privilege I had of talking about what I think outstanding leadership is in policing. And I talked about 6 critical success factors. And believe it or not, one of the critical success factors was you should be yourself. Actually, don't be like me. If I'm going to create a successful team, I don't need people that think like me. I need people that know what the best themselves look like and are prepared to challenge me and push me. And that's certainly an ethos I'll be taking to the college. I think it's of grave concern that we don't have more candidates for the top jobs. There's lots of potential reasons for it, and there's lots been written about it. And so I think we need to do more to take a role to encourage the best people to believe in themselves and put themselves forward. So if any of you are thinking PNAC's not for me, they don't want people like me, I'm saying I don't believe that's correct. That's not the system I want to be part of. I want to nurture opportunities for everyone who has the talent, motivation, resilience to push through. So we have got that inclusive, diverse background of thought, not only in protective characteristics, but all of you, in truth. Now, there are some other sort of fundamental mechanical problems. I think that Bernie might be able to say something. That I think the SCC and PNAC are under review, aren't they, Bernie?
Yes, so obviously, like you, we would all want a diverse, competitive pool of candidates for every leadership role, right from sergeant through to chief officer at every level. That is what we'd always want. If I just focused for a second on chief officers, which I think the question's alluding to, so forgive me if I'm wrong here, there's a problem at the moment between supply and demand. Yep. What do I mean by that? I think in terms of demand at the moment, by the end of this year, I anticipate between 60 and 70 chief officer vacancies. If I then map that across to Strategic Command course this year that kicks off on Monday, previous courses, people looking for jobs, etc., there's a shortfall. So in terms of supply and demand, there is a gap. We've looked really in great detail at Police National Assessment Centre. Obviously, it ran earlier this year. It didn't run last year because of COVID. Had a record number of people that went through it. Obviously, it's quite low pass rates for a variety of different reasons. What we've got to do now is review, one, Police National Assessment Centre. Is it giving us what we want it to give us? Secondly, Strategic Command course. I think it's a really, really top quality course. Is it still giving policing what we need? And thirdly, and most importantly, the pipeline. Are the colleagues in the room here today that actually have just written the Police National Assessment Centre off, don't want to be a chief officer for a variety of different reasons? If there are, we need to know. We need to know so we can say, right, what can we do to address that, to get great people like you with that ambition and actually make the Police National Assessment Centre, Strategic Command course and becoming a chief officer realistic. So we absolutely need to understand that, frankly, in more detail than we do today.
Okay, fair enough. So the intention is there, the message has got to change, and perhaps the way it's done. That's what you're saying, aren't you? Okay, we'll move on to the next question, which is, how will the college assist in making innovation across forces transparent and accessible?
Bernie's probably best placed to answer this, but I haven't spoken about the how, quite intentionally so, because I want to give due respect to what's already been done, and I want to be inclusive in listening. But there is brilliant practice out there, and our role is to help identify it and join it up.
I think it's already been alluded to, perfection being the enemy of good. I think actually if something's really effective, it works and it's good enough, we need to be much more dynamic at rolling it out. We keep talking about the disaggregated or dispersed structure of 43. We need to get over that and say, right, okay, well, that's how it is today. What can we do if something works really good, it's really effective in Force A, to get it out quick time into Force B without messing around and not actually getting too addicted to really, really detailed evaluation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'd just like to echo that. I remember one of the things that the minister said to me when we were talking about the college before I was appointed. He said he wanted to ensure that the college was useful to policing. And actually, that was a sort of sentiment that was echoed a lot by police officers and staff when they were talking to us. You know, how useful is the college to us? And one of the key areas is in this evidence base about what works. And I think having a what works centre that is gritty and useful and where good practice is shared proactively and very quickly, and we're not too hidebound, as Bernie suggests, by academic standards, or it's not too much up in the academic clouds, but actually is very practical in that respect. I think will be not only a good in itself, but also is one of the key ways that I think we can reconnect with the service and be useful to the front lines. This concept of usefulness, I think, is in a sense a very good one, and technology should assist us with that. When I think of all the reforms that Andy drove at Avon and Somerset in respect of data and this sort of cutting-edge use of data, and you have a procession of other forces that then go and visit Avon, and some say it again and again and again. I wonder how many visits you had and your team had, Andy. Question mark. Why can't we then pick that up more quickly once we know that it works and share that kind of practice? And what role should the college have in facilitating that, rather than kind of effectively putting the burden on the individual forces? And also, how much good practice is there that simply isn't known about? Just very quickly, I just was seized by one of the evidence sessions we had in talking to an inspector in one force who was grappling with, she was a detective, and was grappling with investigating Bitcoin crime, and was having to sort of research herself Bitcoin and how it all worked and so on. And I remember thinking, this is absurd. There should be an ability for that officer to go to somebody to share her experience, where this would be disseminated. There would be a practical evidence base that would be available to her. Clearly that wasn't the case in respect of what is an emerging form of crime.
So do you want the College of Policing then to be the reference point for that?
Yes,
to be where people come to?
I think it is one of the three key things that the college does, which is hold the evidence base. And I think we need to be much better at that.
Okay. Another question about the College of Policing and how it's going to tackle the big void in detective numbers. Perhaps we should have answered this with the previous question. But how it's going to tackle the big void in detective numbers across PVP units across England and Wales.
I knew it would be me.
Yeah.
So the shortfall in detectives isn't new. It's been there, to my knowledge, for about 6 or 7 years now, and that's been driven by a number of different things that you will know in much more detail. Clearly, we're having different discussions with people about direct entry detectives, etc., and we've done it, etc., etc. We're working with Jason Hogg, the deputy from whatever force Jason's in, Thames Valley. We're working with Jason Hogg. He's absolutely raised this issue with us. This is a really important issue. Obviously, in terms of this high-risk area, the skills that we're looking at around detectives and the actual throughput into there, really important. It's work in progress. I haven't got a silver bullet here and now. I'd be delighted if someone else has.
Okay. I don't think they have at the moment, so I want to end on one last question because we've got a couple of minutes, but this is important. And it says, how will the College of Policing turbocharge best practice nationally to help forces get to grips with rape, sexual offences and domestic abuse? Leadership from the College of Policing on these key areas would surely create capacity within the service.
If I had the first stab at that. So my erstwhile Deputy Chief Constable, Sarah Crowe, is an outstanding National Police Chiefs Council lead on rape and serious sexual offences. And I know that she's got a portfolio of work which includes academic research at a very practical level about what works to improve it. I know that it was interesting to hear Tom talk about the disjointed criminal justice system. Actually, it's a system like no others, because many of those, he mentioned 4 component parts, but many of the component parts actually fiercely, and rightly so in many respects, value their independence. So whilst I talk about the glue that joins policing, there is a glue that joins the criminal justice system. Too often it's the victim who suffers the sharp end of the uncomfortable mismatch between those operationally independent groups. But actually there is another glue, there's data. When you look at the data across the criminal justice system, and coming back to rape now, for rape and serious sexual offences, and you look at those 3-year delays, actually the approach that I would encourage us to take in resolving these rape issues is one of factfulness. There's 2 reasons how human beings make up their mind about things. One is experience, personal experience, stories and anecdotes from people they trust. We almost, in a pre-data age, completely relied on that. You can trust the police because they don't tell lies, do they? Actually, the second aspect of how people make up their minds about stuff is data and factfulness. Now, at the moment, some of the component parts of the criminal justice system have been reluctant to give up their data. And actually, that's because when you look at the data of the journey of the victim, it throws up some really, really uncomfortable truths about where the failures and shortcomings are. And we should not be afraid of them. You know, I don't think we are as a service, actually. So one of the other things that Sarah Crew is doing is taking a factful approach by data sharing with the other criminal justice agencies about the journey of the victim. She will incorporate a series of standards. Now, I've been a chief officer for, I think, for about 15 years. One of the things that's frustrated me is where the standards are set at such a point that if we're going to meet these standards in every area, there won't be anyone in uniform on the streets. Now, so the college can't be part of that. They have to be pragmatic and realistic standards. But we know in a serious area such as rape, those standards are going to be pretty seriously high. Now, I haven't started my job yet, but if we are to have a more muscular, more influential, more forward-leaning College of Policing that actually maybe even uses its power to set standards, then I will be having a conversation with Sarah Crew about what those standards are on rape and serious sexual offences. But I won't be setting you up to fail.
Okay. On that positive note, we are going to leave it because we are a minute over. So Nick and Andy, I want to wish you all the best for the future and good luck with what you're doing. Let's hope it all works. And also to you, Bernie, thank you very much for holding the fort. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them all, please, a round of applause.